Anyway, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's really nice for you to come along to this chat in our new hall, our new venue, which obviously is much nicer. And it's really nice seeing some old faces and obviously some new faces as well. Also, we've got the auction and the raffle tonight, and I want to thank those that have donated. We've got some truly fantastic prizes for the auction and for the raffle. And as you know, we're doing this charity, Scottish Little Soldiers, which is quite close to my heart. So again, please, I know things are tight, but please dig deep. And I know we've sold loads of raffle tickets, but if you haven't got any, see Dean and he'll sort you out. I'm not going to bore you anymore. I'm going to hand you over to who you've come to see, Chris Yates.
Thank you. Not long enough, Neil. I haven't finished my cup of tea. No, how could I be? How could I be so rude? Thank you for coming, and it's interesting to be here because the last time I was in this hall was to see. Actually, it's quite appropriate. Was to see my eldest boy, who was then 5, and it was the end of term concert, and his class were dancing to a piece of music which I knew quite well. It is quite a lovely bit of music in parts, by the French composer Saint-Saëns, and the bit that Alex was dancing on his own, it was a solo performance. He was dressed as a fish. Because that was the title of that movement. It was the Carnival of Animals, and he was the fish. And it was beautiful. It was so well done. And he had a big fish head and scales and fins, and he just pranced around the room and pretending to be a fish. And even the headmistress had tears in her eyes, because it was just... and I thought, that's good. So it'll seem kind of... resonant when I come back here, because it's, I have been here since, but this to come down and do a talk about fish and other things, of course, is quite nice, because I have fond memories of this place. But anyway, the fishing this year has not been terribly busy, because I've, as you know, from several previous meetings with you all, I'm trying to finish my next book, which is not about fish. It's mostly about hen harriers. And this is a good time to talk about hen harriers. I promise not to talk very... I must be careful about that. It's the popping. I must be very careful not to talk about hen harriers too much, because it's meant to be about more finny things rather than wingy things. Anyway, this is a good month, because the first harriers are on their way north, or on the way south from the north, as we speak. So soon they'll be coming down to overwinter within just a few miles of here. Not many. I think I had 6 encounters with eagles, with harriers last winter. Close encounters, that is. I saw a few in the distance. But I now count those encounters as valuable as catching a monster carp, because they're so rare and so exclusive and so beautiful that when you see one, it just raises my heart rate that enough to, even on a freezing cold day, which if you're out in the wind and you've been waiting, you're blending into the landscape because you can't let them see you. So it's exactly like stalking a carp or waiting for a carp, except you're in more open country, because that's their territory, that's their hunting territory. They like to hunt in open country. So. And there's a question that I know is coming up because I was given this was Neil's idea, to actually ask you all to come up with some questions instead of a random improvised Q&A, which I do like, because I like sort of spontaneous responses to things. We've got a list of favourite questions, which I'm going to go through later. Not all of them, but a few of them. And one of the questions is, which I can answer now because it's part of this birding, fishing kind of connection, is do I do I believe in ESP, in extrasensory perception, and I've already kind of, I've discussed this in my pages, in my fishing books very often. It's that makes me a proper fisherman. Without that sense of what might be happening around me, without being able to see what's happening around me, I would never have caught a big carp. I would never have caught a big barbel. It's your nose, if you like. It's that inner sense of what's going on, which makes you change, or makes me change position, move to another position at a critical moment. And it's not coincidence, because it's happened so many times. And what I was really happy about when I started, when I first got hit with the idea of hen harriers, because I saw this bird go by me, and it hit me so hard. Just the vision of it. It was like the moment I discovered my very first carp when I was 5, which sent me on an obsession which lasted 60 years. I mean, it never really left me. There were other species came in and swam in and took over for a bit and then left, and then the carp came back. But this was exactly the same, and so I recognised it. I recognised that jump in my heart, and so there's still that connection, even though I'm now more a birder than a fisher. It's still there, and this business about ESP, which is very, very close to my heart, is the mysterious thing to try and describe. People who understand it, who've experienced it themselves, know precisely what I'm talking about. There's nothing unusual in it. We all had this. This talent once, because we wouldn't have survived without it. When back in the pagan days and previously before, when there was just tribes of us wandering around. If you didn't have that feeling for the landscape, you probably wouldn't have made it. And so, and it's still with us. And some people can have it. Some people have more faith in it than others. But where I'm heading now is the fact that it is the connection between an example. I was fishing at Redmire. I think I might have told this story to somebody before, so excuse me if you've heard it before. I was reading, and this is one of countless examples. I was reading, it was a quiet day, nothing was happening, and I suddenly stopped, and you're in the wrong place. Put the book down, get the float rod, get some beans, No, put the corn away. You need red kidney beans. So red kidney beans, and it was pretty specific. And I was thinking, so what's going? And it was almost like, what's going on? And it was like a little voice in my ear. No, you don't want the shallow water now. Go down to the dam. Went down to the dam, flicked out a bait on the float, right under the dam wall at a specific place. He said, that's it. And as soon as it was there, I felt so comfortable. Within 10 minutes, the float went down, and it was a 38-pound carp. And I would have never even thought of going down there had I not had that little alarm in my head. And I was walking last year, and this was sort of 1973, and now it's continuing. It's still happening. I was walking down the lane not far from here. It goes down to Wimborne St Giles, getting ready to cut into the trees where you get a good view of this open bit of rolling country. There's a long barrow, there's tumuli, and then there's open grass. There's all burial mounds. It's a wonderfully ancient kind of landscape, and it's somehow appropriate that that's where the hen harrier haunts in the winter, and you just see it coming low and very slow, even slower than an owl, which is what's so incredible about them. So I was waiting for this slowness. I was looking for slowness. When you see that something coming, is it me, or is that bird actually flying at about sort of 4 miles an hour, into a force 5, and yet with real control as it's looking for and listening for mice and voles in the long grass. And I was up for waiting all day just for that one encounter. And then suddenly something hit me and said, no. I was settling down. I was in the spot. No. Go down the path, go back to the lane, walk along the lane a little bit more, climb the bank, and look north. And it was just like that moment when I saw that big carp. Caught that big carp. And I climbed the bank, and I got the bins up and looked along this tree line, and I was scanning along from left to right, and then as I scanned along, it bumped into this monster, and it was like, God, that's just like, looking out of the top of a willow tree at Redmire and looking down straight away, you see this monster carp, and this was a monster bird. It was a sea eagle, and I just knew I was going to see something, and that happens. Are we losing sound? Good. Sorry, everybody, I can't tell you the end of the story. The battery's gone. But anyway, so the same things, the same processes that you go through at the beginning of a fishing day, they're still with me when I go birding, because you have to think what the conditions are like. You look at the direction of the wind. The only difference is I can just run straight out the door. I don't have to get a load of clobber. I just have to get my binoculars, and depending on the weather, how many coats I'll wear, and I'm gone. So it's a much more efficient way of just getting out there and making contact. And that's the only kind of contact I like to make. I still don't have a mobile phone. Disconnect is my favourite mode of existence. I don't want any connection with anything, anybody most of the time. What am I doing here then? I'm trying to explain how all this wonderful world works. Mind you, with the way, no, don't say it. It will stay working, despite the fact we've got some maniacs in control of the country at the moment. Yes, I have been fishing though. I went fishing for a charity do only 2 weeks ago, and during this day, there's two people. It was an auction. Some people, it's always a blooming auction, isn't it? It was a day's fishing with me and Hugh Miles, and we went down to a very nice little lake, not far from here, a place called Edmondsham, and the two people who'd bid the most, they were waiting very early in the morning. I mean, God, it must have been 7:30 in the morning. I mean, no one gets out at that time. I think I arrived about 8:30, but they were, they're okay about that, and they were already fishing and they were already catching fish, and then I said, after chatting to them for a while, they were very happy with the day. It was a lovely day. Fish were moving in the lily pads. They'd caught, I think Hugh had a tench of about 4 pounds, so he was very happy. He'd caught the biggest fish so far. The others had caught smaller fish. And so I went up to one of the two, Ben and Dan, and I said to Dan, Hugh Miles has just caught the biggest fish, and he's not going to let us forget that. So we have got to get a bigger fish, and you're going to use this rod, because they were using those rods. I will not mention what they were made out of, but I said this is the kind of rod you need to get a bigger fish than Hugh's, and I gave him one of my lovely old carp rods. Not an ancient. Well, it is quite old. It's going to be nearly 40 years old. Made by Edward Barder, 2-piece, 11-foot carp rod. But the real, and this is, I can introduce the star guest this evening. The real was this. This is which way round is this going to go from my angle? This is Donald Leaney's Ariel, the man who put the carp in Redmire. And he gave me this reel a few weeks after I met him for the first time, when I realised he lived in the village next to me. And it was only a 20-minute bicycle ride to his lovely old 16th century house. And I just got this record carp, and he phoned me up and said, I hear you've, I can't remember his exact words, I hear there was, I know what it was, I hear there was an incident at Redmire, and I want you to come over to see me for a cup of tea tomorrow and tell me all about it. And it's a very sort of clipped, he was a major in the Second World War. And I thought he was going to be like that when I met him, but he wasn't at all. He was such a lovely, lovely old man. He was 83, 84 when I met him. Anyway, after we discussed Redmire, and I asked him all those questions that any carp angler would like to know about what he thought about his progeny, his little fish, which were no bigger than 5 inches, 55-inch carp that he put into red bait. How do you feel about that? The fact that they did so well, and he just rose. It was just one eyebrow really. So I wasn't surprised. You know, it was the sort of thing. If there's good water and you don't put too many fish in, that was always his thing. He ran the Surrey trout farm, and he was a very kind of, you'd call him a green farmer now, because he always did it. He was always very kind of understated. Never put too many fish in. If anything, put fewer fish in. They'll do better that way. And he knew where the hardiest and the fastest growing fish were to be found. And he went and got the stock when they were just that year's stock, and he'd pick out the very best. And that's how Redmire got to be Redmire. Anyway, after about 3 or 4 tea time meetings, just talking about everything from fish to snakes, to which he loved reptiles. He did natural sciences at Oxford. That was what he got his degree in, and marine biology. So he was full of a fascinating man, full of info. And then he just came up with this reel one day and said, "What do you think of that? Would you use a reel like that?" And I said, "Oh yes, that's an Allcock aerial. I recognise that reel." He said, "It was a 21st birthday present to me in 1922, and that's why I brought it, because it's 100 years old this year. And would you like it?" I said, "You can't give it to me. It's worth a fortune. I mean, it would be worth more now, but it was worth a lot back in 1980s." I said, no, let me pay you for it. And he said, "I want you to take it." No, I've got to take it. And he just... So, of course, I had to take it. And it's been brilliant. It's anyway, this is the reel that I gave to Ben on the rod with a little bit of floating crust. And I just said, "Now follow me, and we'll get a carp bigger than Hughes." And so we went along. I'd scouted out this spot earlier where the lake narrows, and there was a hole in the lilies. And that little hole, drop that crust. Don't try and do anything fancy. Just pull a big loop and just gently, no, not in the open water, in the little hole. Try again. Nearly, that's on the pad. Bring it back. Wait a minute. No, calm down. Let the ripples. That's it. You got it right. Okay. And of course, being a modern angler, he was ready to go as soon as the line would move. He would strike straight away, because that's what most carp anglers do now. They always have sort of like self-hooking rigs or bolt rigs or anything. I said, "You've got to wait. When it goes, don't do anything. Just stay very still. Let the line slide away. Not too far, but you'll know. But don't strike straight away," because I remember offering Martin Bowler my rod once, and he made it. He's after rod, he's the best angler I've ever fished with, but he strikes instantly. And I said to him, "You're going to miss it. If you do that, you're going to miss it." And of course he did. And this was it was a chance of a big fish, and I was a bit surprised by that. But anyway, Ben didn't miss it, because there was a sudden, within 3 minutes, the lily pads all began to jostle about, and then it went very still. I said, "It's looking at it. You just know he's looking at it. Wait, here he comes." And then, and that was it, gone. No. I wanted, but he did wait. Boosh. I mean, it wasn't a big fish, but it was a double-figure fish, and it was bigger than Hugh's fish. So everyone was very happy, and I said, "Right, time for tea," and we fired up the Kelly kettle, and Hugh he had to be pretty merry about it too, because these were the people who'd paid quite a bit of money to come and have this day's fishing with us, and he'd got his wife Sue to make us a Victoria sponge, and which we always used to do traditionally, Hugh and I, whenever we would fish always together at the beginning of the season at a lake not far from here, another lake, Crucian Lake, and she would always make Victoria sponge for that celebratory day. So we had this. I think we ate the whole cake in one go, and it's a massive cake, so that wasn't a good idea. So we didn't do an awful lot after that. But anyway, it was nice that this reel was in action, and because I hadn't used it for a few years. The last time I'd used it was on another lake, which would have been probably pre-COVID, about the year before COVID, and just 2019, and again, it had to be this real. I would always use it if the day was right, and it was the anniversary of Walker's 44. I'm a sucker for those kind of things. So he had caught his 44 pounder at Redmire in whenever it was, 52, and it's on the 13th of September, which was always a day I would go fishing for carp. And I took this reel and I walked around this lake, and there was no one there, and it was drizzly, and it felt, it was definitely, it was autumn, even though it's only the 13th of September. It really felt like autumn, and it felt like the light wasn't going to last very long because it was a very heavy day. But when you have a day like that, and it's not cold, and there's not a chilly wind, there's quite a breeze blowing, but you just think it's like the gold mines are all opening, because they're great conditions for carp fishing. And I was not using my Edward Barder carp rod, which I do like, but I was using my Dick Walker carp rod. I used to have two of his rods, but this was one that I've still got, a proper Mark IV carp rod. And so I went round the lake, and there was absolutely nothing happening. And I was a bit puzzled, because it just seemed, and normally you can see fish cruising about. It's only it's like a sort of, it's like a double of Redmire, except it's much shallower and a lot more trees. And so normally you can see fish moving around. And I got to this one spot, and I went by it, nothing. And I was walking away, and suddenly I had that same feeling that I was describing earlier. No, go back. And so I just went back and sort of sat down and waited maybe 10 minutes, and I just saw this lovely little kind of mysterious vortex. And anybody who's fished for carp will recognize that. It's where their heads are down, and they're just very gently, browsing on the and it's that balancing act. The tail just keeps them going, and it creates that vortex. And when you just see that vortex on its own, and you don't expect anything to be there, and you think, ooh, and you just know that's the sign. So I got down, I baited with just 2 grains of sweet corn, a little short dumpy quill float. It was only about, I don't know, maybe 18 inches deep. Flicked slightly over it and drew it in. Put the rod on a bramble bush, because it was a lovely big blackberry bush in front of me, and just waited 5 minutes, maybe less, and the float just slid away. And the reel, it's got a. I can't do it one-handed, but I should put the check on so you can. Hang on, I've just got to give you the. I should put the mic. Right, okay. This is. Would you like to do that voice now? Come on, don't be shy. Oh, too much. This is the trouble with a centre pin. You get a bit of a overwind. It sounds good though. You've got to hear this noise. No, it's almost gone. I can tell. Wait. I can see the problem. Yeah, it's like waiting for the ideal sound effect. That's it. Right. Now, I want it to come over on the mic, but it's not going to if I do that. Idiot boy. You have to do it that way. Right. Yeah. What you've got to do.
I've got to pull it. Run.
Yeah. And you got to see. You got to see if I can stop you before you get to the exit.
You haven't got enough line.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I have. Go on, get going. Go. It's not being picked up. That's the sound. But it went on and on. So I could have done that straight away, couldn't I, without having to mess around with them. I like the bass note we're getting. Actually, for something 100 years old, that's a pretty good action after all that time. Anyway, after a long run and lots of splashing and rolling, it came in and it was the nicest looking carp I've ever caught from that lake. It looked like a sort of brand new pin of a 26-pound common, and it was And it was the last fish I caught from that place, because then COVID came along. And since then, the old lord who owned the place has gone, and so things have changed. So in a way, it was a nice way to go out. But that's the last fish I caught on the Leanie. But I have also caught my best barbel on it. I've had, I don't know, I maybe have had 14 or 15 double-figure barbel on it, and also my biggest chub. So it's been a lucky reel. I mean, not a monster chub. In fact, we don't know how big the chub was. But I have a witness here. Max, where are you? Oh, there you are. I was looking at you saying, yeah, Max actually landed it for me. Max is a long-time member of the Golden Scale Club. He's the club pugilist, so no trouble tonight, okay? Otherwise, I'll call Max. But anyway, he landed this fish for me, and I thought it was a barbel to start with, but then I realised you could just tell, there's slightly more angle in the jagging, and it came in, and we both went, God, that's going to be a 6-pounder. But I don't know if it was. It was a 6-pounder, though, wasn't it? Yeah. 7, you reckon? 7? Yeah, I didn't have my scales. You didn't have your scales. Anyway, yeah, and it was dark. We wouldn't have been able to read them, read the digits or whatever. But anyway, that was at Biston on the Avon, which used to be a favourite place. We had many happy tea times, and also some very good barbel, and where I fished with someone who I miss greatly, a man who was one of us, as it were, Roy Henry Tuckey, who I think I mentioned last year, or maybe it was the year before. No, it was last year I did. He's unfortunately not with us anymore, and I miss him as much as I miss Rod. He was such a great character, and he was a very good angler too. And also, it was down to him. It was his fault that I suddenly became a convert to barbel angling, because I met him at Redmire, and he was on his first stint, and I was thinking that I've probably done this long enough now. But then he joined, and he was such fun to fish with. He was such a great character. He was a bit like Rod. He had a great sense of humour, but he was also very intense. When things started to happen, he would get very kind of focused, and yes, we fished quite well together. He'd been on his side of the lake, me on my side, and we'd meet on the dam for a cup of tea to discuss plans for the week. And there was three-man syndicate, and he was one of the three. I can't remember who the third one was. Someone who obviously wasn't that enthusiastic. We hardly ever saw him. But anyway, yes, I miss Henry. He was a good man, and I used to see him. In fact, you fished with him at Biston. He was at Biston with us a couple of times, and he took me barbel fishing for the first time on the Kennet. And I caught my first barbel, and that would have been the year after I left Redmire, and straight away I thought, this is interesting. This barbel is doing something to me, just like when I saw my first carp. So suddenly I became totally obsessed by barbel, because it was so different, the actual approach to the fishing. It was so much, you were more mobile, you were, the river was obviously mobile, and it was just, things came alive again for me, because I think I'd been carp fishing for too long. So I became, a bit of a mad carp fisherman. It was all Henry's fault. So, but thank you, Henry, because I did enjoy it very much. It was great, and it was because of Henry, if you like, that got me down here. Because if we hadn't started going barbel fishing, and then coming to the Avon, because you've got to go to the Avon when you're fishing for barbel, I just loved the landscape around here so much that I thought. I was living then on the Hampshire-Surrey border in a lovely little cottage, little weatherboard cottage in a National Trust Oakwood, and I bought this cottage for 16 grand in 1978, and it was just beautiful place. But 60 miles to go fishing for barbel, sometimes just in the evening, and it's 120 there and back. And in the end, I thought we're going to have to move west. And so we did. So thanks, Henry. That's an awful lot of trouble, that barbel caused. But it's very nice to be here, and that's why I'm talking to you now. Because I mean, we would have to have gone to somewhere sort of, I don't know. It would have to be in Hazelmere Village Hall or somewhere like that. But I would, without Penry, I would have. It's funny how the way these things fall. It's like a deck of cards, you know. I would never have discovered the hen harrier, because it was only when I was wandering around the fields down here, just seeing what was going on, this bird went by me one evening, and I thought, "What the hell is that?" And it was like an owl, but with the face of a hawk, and it completely sort of bowled me over. I didn't know what it was, and I was wondering afterwards how it was that I'd been. You know, I spent most of my time outside, you know, and it was this. I was probably 65 then, so 65 years, and fishing in places where people had seen hen rabbits. They'd mentioned them, but I'd never seen one. So how was it that this bird, miraculous-looking bird, could have been around all this time, 60 years, and I'd never seen one? Because I honestly hadn't. Maybe I'd noticed a shape going by in the distance, but I'd probably been either playing a fish or more likely making a cup of tea at that crucial moment when it goes by. And so again, that's Henry's fault, because there were no. It's the wrong country where I used to live. Too woody, too not enough open ground. So all these little paths lead off from people you meet. People suggest things to you. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Let's go and have a look at that. And you go, and suddenly you become not just interested, you become fascinated, and then you become obsessed. Occasionally, and an obsession can be a bad thing, but it can also lead you into all kinds of delights, because you start noticing other things as well. But one of the actually, that reminds me, that's one of the questions on this sheet of paper that I've got that Neil gave me, a question about obsession. So maybe that's the question answered in a way. And I think that sort of brings me to the moment when I should now, because there's some really good, really kind of interesting questions that could easily lead me into. So you just got to tell me when to stop. But I'm going to go to the questions now, because I'll edit them. You know, the nice thing about questions, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have spontaneous questions as well, because people are going to, you know, somebody might like to sort of just perk up and say, "What's going on? I want you to tell me about crucian carp or tench or whatever." We haven't, you know, so, and then we can talk about those as well. But typically, no, this has been answered in a way. This is, but Marcus, no, you're not listening, are you? 'Cause this isn't live like it was last year. But this is from Marcus Child. It's just I have to. Typically, it's the top of these pages. Tracing your obsessions: carp, barbel, giant perch, bass at sea, hen harrier. What sparks the obsession? Do you gradually grow into an overcoming awareness, or is it the catalyst? Or is the catalyst more of a surprise to you? And what, might you guess, will be next after hen harriers? Is the next focus of interest already brewing? And nice question. I like that. I didn't. This is Neil typed this up, so it's not my priority. It's just the top of the list. But no, at the moment, nothing else is brewing. Although I have been heavily involved in goshawks. I really do like goshawks. Where my son is living next to a sort of like goshawk city down in the New Forest, so I've been enjoying watching them. But anyway, he also asked a question, and this is really why I'm. He said, in 2008, I received a letter from you thanking me for a goose quill float I had made for you in the summer. You wrote to say how the float had been lucky in a lily-covered tench pond. Out of the Blue was published in 2008, opens with a passage in which you are watching a quill float slide under a lily-covered tench pond. I've often wondered, was that my float, the star of one of the sentences? Please just say yes anyway. Yes, of course it was. Lee Tebble writes a simple question, and again, look at. And I only had one glance at this on Wednesday evening when Neil came round my place and deposited it. Chris, do you believe in entry? Do you believe in extrasensory perception? We know I do. Thank you, Lee. Daniel Glover. Daniel Gover. I'm sure it may have been covered, but I can't remember. I'd like to know just how big the king in Redmire was. In hindsight, do you still really believe it was over 70 pounds? My answer, yes. Thank you, Daniel. No, I won't go on about it, but I did see this fish that Jack Hilton had seen, Bill Quinlan had seen, and Rod Hutchinson had seen, and I hadn't. They saw it several years before, and each time they were so goggle-eyed afterwards, and they even Rod, he was quite a serious person underneath all his sort of larking about, and there was no doubt that they'd seen something staggering, and they couldn't quite get it out of their system, even though they knew that probably there was never going to be a chance of catching it, because how would you land a thing like that? At the time, it didn't seem possible, but anyway, I did see it as I think I've said to you on our first meeting, the first meeting we did in Pentridge, that I saw it going by a willow one day, and it was only as far away as the front row, and it was colossal. It was absolutely colossal, and I don't know if it really was 70 pounds, but it was. I know how big a 50-pounder is, and it was so much bigger than a 50-pounder. It was just, if somebody had said that's 80 pound, I would have believed him. So that's your reply, Daniel. And Lee Jeffries writes, God, it's Redmire again. This is getting boring. If you had an opportunity now to fish for the Redmire chess pieces, especially the king and the queen, what would you do differently, if anything? And if you had the opportunity now to fish for the Redmire chess pieces, especially the king and the queen, oh no, you've printed this twice. It's like he said it twice, just because I forget things very quickly. No, yeah. No, Lee, I wouldn't do anything different. I can't change. The whole thing about the way I fish is simplicity. By keeping it simple, I'm closer to what I'm trying to achieve. If I complicate things with rigs, too many changes of bait, too many changes of tackle, I lose the sense of what's going on around me. So that's my excuse for keeping it as simple as possible. Very often just a hook and a line, but so no. And I would use the same baits as well, probably. But of course, Redmire's different now, and it's a bit. It had to have some attention because it was beginning to silt up, but it did. I won't say it. I wouldn't. I don't think I would. I will. Other people would like to fish it, I'm sure, and other people will get the same sort of response from it as I got from it when I fished it the first time. But of course, it can never be the same. It can never be the same even the next day. But certainly after 40 years, it's changed a lot, and it's nearly 50 years since I first fished it with rod, and that was it was in its prime then, even though I suppose you could say 20 years before then, when Walker was fishing at Redmire from the 1950s to say the mid 60s, that would probably be the peak time. But when Rod and I were fishing there, no one knew really anything about it, not to be able to consistently catch fish. And so it had that mystery, which is the element that a place has to have for me. That's why I don't fish. I never have fished sort of stocked, overstocked carp waters or waters that just screaming carp, and there's just that you just don't have to look anywhere for them. They're there. They're just instantly there because there's so many they're stuffed in like concentration camp carp. I can't fish in places like that. But red mire was not like that. You know, you'd see them on one day, and then the next day, you could sit up a tree all day, and you'd see nothing. And it would be the same for maybe two or 3 days, and then suddenly one would roll, and just to remind you that they were there. But most of the people in the syndicate, when I joined with Rod, they would catch maybe 1 or 2 carp in a year. So it was, it had that mystery about it. It was wonderful. Jay Hunt. I like the start of this question. Okay. Okay. He's cool, Jay. I like Jay. Okay.
He's a big lad, Chris.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Jay, sorry. Get ready, Max, just in case. I don't want a bad reaction. No, I'm just saying you're really cool, Jay. Okay. So I want to get this sentence scanning properly. It's like he's talking to you, Neil, and not me. But this is a question. But so I'm going to recite it just as he's written it. Okay. So after Chris witnessed the teapot rise from the lake bed and he jammed it into the tree, was it ever seen again? And does he think it was an omen or bore any significance to events that followed? Oh, God, I'm going to have to tell the teapot story again, which I'm sure some people... You don't know the teapot story? Oh, good. How many... Can we have a show of hands? Who doesn't know the teapot story? Oh, that's fantastic. Please let me entertain you with the teapot story. This could go until midnight, I have to warn you. I've got to get the dates right now. God, I'm getting, I'm mid-70s now, and dates sort of fly out my head. 70, it would have been 70, when would it have been? Of course, you idiot. It was 79. It was 79, of course it was, because that ties in perfectly. It was the last day of the season, 1979, when there were seasons. I mean, there's still seasons to me, but... So it's March the 14th, 1979, and fishing red mire on my own. It's a windy day. The wind is easterly and quite chilly, but I have seen a carp roll twice, and very often March would be, you'd get a chance. Hardly anybody ever fished during the close season in red mire. In the close season, I hope not, they get shot. Hardly anybody used to fish in the winter in those days. But when it was mild, somebody would go down there, and now and again one would come out. Anyway, I was determined to get one on the final day because it felt like spring the previous day, and it was mild, and the primroses were showing, and I got down to red mire quite early. And of course, there was no one there. I had the place to myself. After the end of October, you could go to red mire whenever you wanted because nobody was there. It was wonderful in those days. So it hardly ever got fished through the winter. Anyway, I was fishing in the evening pitch, the ghost pitch, wonderful place. Even if the carp weren't around, the ghosts were always around. And I had 2 baits out, 2 Mark IVs out, not a movement until about early afternoon, and the line just started to go, yeah, go on, and then fell back slack again. It's probably something just bumping into it. And then suddenly, something just rose to the surface, and I thought it was it bobbed on the surface. It came up suddenly because I was looking out across the pool, looking towards the willow pitch, and it was right in the middle. And it just came out, and it kind of bobbed a couple of times slowly and sort of settled, and I thought, that's a carp. That's obviously a dead carp that's been lying on the bottom for some time, and it's now it's taken on gas. It's decomposing, but it's got enough gas in it to sort of bring it up to the surface, and the wind was blowing it slowly down towards the dam. I thought, I'll go and have a look at that later. And it didn't look like a big carp, but I wonder why it died. It looked like a maybe 5-pounder. Anyway, I forgot all about it. As I carried on fishing, because the line moved again, and about sort of half an hour later, I started to hear this chink, chink, chink sound. It was almost like a cracked bell chiming but not chiming very well. And I thought, what on earth is that? And it was constant, repetitive rhythm, chink, chink, chink. And I thought, I've got to go and check. So I went round to the dam, and I thought, I'm in the haunted swim. It's probably the ghost. He's gone for a wander, and he's telling me to come down, and and I'll have there'll be an apparition. Anyway, there was an apparition, because I went down to where the sound was, and it was the teapot. It was a teapot, a brown china teapot. And as the ripples were going, so it was every ripple that came along, because it was the wind was strong. It was chinking it into the, and it made this really rather dull little chink as it tapped into the dam wall, which was a brick, an old ancient brick dam wall in those days, and the top layer at least. So I went and got my landing net and I hiked it out, and it was a brown china teapot with a sort of bluish ring round the top. There was no lid, and there was no spout, but there was a handle. And I thought, that's interesting. And I saw it rise, so it was obviously out in the middle of the pond. What was it doing there? And then I remembered that Fred J. Taylor had once written me a letter to say, he had said himself, and Dick Walker had told me too, you can't have a cup of tea when you're fishing unless you've got a brown china teapot. That's all I remembered. That's all I needed to remember, of course. And it all came to me. He'd caught the 44-pounder in 1952. He was so elated, so excited, that he picked up the first thing that came to mind to just express his emotion. It was a teapot, and he hurled it into the lake. Hooray! Doosh! 1952. It's been down there all that time. And it had come up to the surface, and I thought, maybe when I fish here next time, what's happened today, I did think it was like Excalibur rising from the depths, King Arthur's sword, and I've got the teapot, the lucky teapot, so I took it up to the shallows, and I jammed it in a willow right at the top of the shallows, right where the feeder stream comes in. The next time I fished Redmire, I landed the record carp right next to that willow, right next to that teapot, and I thought, that's quite interesting. And then I wrote to Fred and told him the story, and he said, he didn't confirm, but he said, this is very strange, because that he did have the teapot when we arrived. I remember it, yes. But when we packed up, he said to Dick, "Where's your teapot?" And he said, "Oh, we've been using the he had a sort of metal one, like a chrome one, and I think he was a bit ashamed that he'd thrown the teapot in. But he said he definitely didn't have the teapot, and that teapot was there. So it is a nice story. And afterwards, I took the teapot home at the end of that week, and I put it in my garden under very foolishly, under an apple tree. So you can imagine and there was a Bramley, big cooking apples. And it was there for maybe 5 years until a big Bramley fell on it and broke it to pieces. And I didn't keep the pieces. So, was I really convinced, had I been convinced that it was lucky, that it was an omen? Yes, it was an omen, but part of me was saying, don't be so stupid. But anyway, that is the true story of the Redmire teapot. Thank you very much. Applause, please, now. Are you in touch with Pete from Childhood Dreams? Do you remember Pete in Passion for Angling? And again, this is probably a surprise to quite a few people. Pete, I am, yes, still in touch with him. He was probably 13. Yes, he was. He was 13 when he caught that barber with me on the Avon. He's now 43. God, yeah. And he is, in fact, Hugh Miles' son. We needed a youngster, to catch a barbel. And he'd never caught a barbel before, so we didn't have to go to a model agency or someone like that, which is what people have to do in films, apparently. He can't just take friends. But anyway, so Pete is Hugh Miles' son, so yes, I'm still in touch with him. And his other question is, did you ever go back to the lake from Monster Myths and have another go for Harry, which was a monster carp that we fished for at the end? Is Mark Poyser here? Yeah, you are. Good. I'm glad I can speak to the. Thank you. The lake that Harry lived in is 5 miles from here, just to the east at Wimborne St Giles. Unfortunately, there are no carp left now. They've all gone. Yeah. No, it didn't dry out. They just died of. They never spawned. It was very. It was spring-fed, very cold. So it was the original fish that went in the year after Redmire, also leanies. They never bred, and so it was an ancient fish, and it would have been 70 years old when it died. And I did go back. When we finished filming. I went back. I got permission to go back on my own, which was fantastic, without Bob. Hooray! He was such a bully, and always wanted the top swim. But no, I just crept around the lake until I found some fish feeding and flicked out some sweet corn and just sat back and thought, this isn't going to take long. And it didn't. And I had that was also a 26-pounder, yeah, and it was also a common. But we did see Harry, though. We were both up the top of a tree, and Hugh was filming us with binoculars. He was filming us looking through binoculars, just scanning. And unfortunately, he'd built a scaffold pole to film from, so that when we were up trees, he could be level with us and listening to what we were saying and watching us fishing from the tree or wherever. And I don't think we actually did any fishing from a tree in that episode. Anyway, he'd gone back to his van to get something, and in that time he'd been away, this thing came up on the far bank, and we were both looking at it. We said, that's got to be Harry. And we saw it maybe 20 seconds. It was twice as big as anything else we'd seen. There was quite a fair few 30-pounders, but this was it's like the king. It was as big as the king, it seemed to me. It's colossal, stupendous. Anyway, it came up, and then it slowly went down, proverbial submarine, and we never saw it again. So there was a big fish in there. When did you learn to Wallace cast, and who taught you if you're not self-taught? Watching others and how they were fishing, but my most influential teacher was that reel. It's the nicest reel to cast Wallace style. It's because it's so smooth and it's a wide drum. I soon learned with my couple of narrow drum centre pins, very difficult because the line easily catches around behind the reel seat. But with a wide drum, you have much more control. So yeah, it was Leanie's aerial that taught me how to cast. And in fact, we shall do a demonstration later, and I'm going to drop a something in that bin from here with. That's the task, okay? And then we can have a competition. Max can come up and he can have a go. He's good. Yeah, let's have. In a minute, we'll have a Wallace competition. We could put the bin down the middle of the fairway here. Yeah, I can do kind of. I'm not like a real expert who can get 40, sometimes even 50 yards, and they do it over. I've seen them an overhand cast, and this is with no loops or anything. It's just the action of. I can't do it without letting go of the. I will demonstrate later, But it's a very simple action. It took me a whole season to be able to cast more than, say, 20 yards. But then the next season, I got it, and I could get to the other side of the Avon quite easily with a big lump of, spam, drop it under the willows on the far side, donk, and then let the spam go downstream, and then wait for that bang as the barbel found it. But, so it took a little while. But and I'm fairly cack-handed. Most people have probably managed it in a couple of days. It's no more difficult than learning how to cast a fly, really. You can get the basics. So, here's a good one. Change of tack here. This is good. Matthew Dean, when was the last night walk that you went on? What do you enjoy most about them? And has this changed over the years? The last night walk I went on was the last full moon. There was a lovely, it was a giant moon. I can't remember where it was. It wasn't a blue moon. It was one of those, named moons. It was doing something. It was very close to the Earth, so it did look mammoth. I think it was the closest it's been for some years. And I almost saw it because I'm right up behind my place. I walk about 2 miles and look back, and you can actually see it in midsummer when the moon and the sun change places as to where they rise and where they set. So the sun is setting way around in the northeast, and the moon is rising way down in the south. Get this right. Yeah, when the sun comes up midsummer, it's coming way round northeast, and the moon is coming up southeast. When it's incredible how they change almost exactly. So yes, it was nice to see the moon coming up out of the sea. This last it was the last full moon before last. So yes, I walk at night at least 2 or 3 times a week. But the big walk, the epic, I only do once a year, and it's always around midsummer. And I did miss it this year because it has to be a clear night. I cannot go for a night walk unless I walk in cloud when the sky isn't clear. But if it's going to be an all-night walk, it has to be settled weather, and the sky has to be completely clear. Otherwise, I don't get my reward. And the reward for an all-night walk has to be the sunrise. That's why I'm walking. I'm walking to see the sunrise. Because normally I'm asleep when the sun comes up. I'm an evening person. I've got that. What's the word? I've got an evening chronotype. That's my rhythm. 2 of my children are morning types. I'm evening type. So the only way I can see a sunrise in the summer, I see them all the time in the winter, is to set out early, late evening and watch it come up at 5:40 in June. 10 to 5 is when it comes up here, and so that was the last one I did in. But not this year. I didn't do an all-night one this year because the weather over that period, and I want to see it as far around. It's like when it comes up past the Heelstone at Stonehenge. That's where they aligned it, and I like it to. I see it coming over. Funnily enough, it comes up over Salisbury Plain from the place I always go to. It's always the same destination. I go different routes every year through woods and valleys, but it was always the same. It's an old ancient embankment. It's probably Saxon, with burial mounds all around. Lovely place, like you're haunted. And the only thing I hear when I get there is skylarks. It's absolutely fabulous spot. And deep down below, it's a bit of a headland, and it drops down 800 feet. So you see all the ground below sort of sweeping away to other low hills. And then you see Salisbury Plain 30 miles away, and everything is filling with mist, and the skylarks start to go up, and then suddenly it changes from cold blue to sort of an amber, and then boof, and the sun comes up. And in nearly 40 years, I have never seen a soul in those walks. I mean, obviously, I'm not expected to see them at night, but I'm walking back, early morning. I've never seen anybody. It's lovely. The whole landscape is mine. And I have occasionally taken one of my family, but I much prefer to go on my own. I did once take a woman with me. Oh, God. But she knows how to walk at night. Very, very quiet. Whispers. If you're going to, you've only got to whisper at night. It's like there's kind of resonant silence. You know everything's listening. And anyway, so sorry, but that's enough night walk. Thank you. Dave Clark writes, "What is your most?" Well, this is a tricky one. What is your most modern fishing item? Tricky. Of course. Yes, an incurved, hollow. I can't remember the name, the make of them. But anyway, a hook. I use fishing hooks, and they're probably made this year. So surely that is my modern fishing item. Or yeah. Trust Neil to completely. It was. Oh, it was Dean. Typical Dean. Yeah. You've completely lowered the tone. A Ronnie rig. You know what I think about Ronnie rigs. I won't say it again. Now this is a much better question from Aaron Bird. Chris, what would your favourite biscuit be? Isn't that lovely? What would your favourite biscuit be, and why? My favourite biscuit, to have the tea, obviously, is the Island Bakery mull oatcake. These oatcake, you get a packet, a very nicely designed packet, Island Bakery oatcakes. And in fact, Max sampled one of these only this afternoon when he came round to see if I was actually coming to the meeting, because I had threatened that I might not come, even though it was all, I just thought, wouldn't it be nice if I just didn't turn up? Everyone would have a much better time, and they could tell their own stories and everything. But anyway, so that's the answer to that question. Island Bakery, probably only available from a few outlets. The village shop at Ludwell is the only place around here that has them, but they're very, very Moorish. Yeah, you know them? No?
His question, that was all.
Yeah, definitely. You're Aaron.
Yes.
Great question. Seek out the Island Bakery. Yeah, you'll find it. And the fact that they're from Mull, that's my ultimate destination. And I've only been there once, and I have to go back, because that's where you go in springtime to watch the sky dance of the hen harrier. And I went back for my eldest daughter suddenly phoned me up just before Christmas in 2017 and said, "We've booked your cottage for your 70th birthday." I said, "What? I like to be at home." Yes, we know you like to be at home, but you're not going to be at home this year, and we're coming with you. Where are we going? And she said, "Mull." Oh, okay. And on my birthday, I saw. I'd never seen a sky dance. It's when the male displays. Incredible. It's like it totally opposes the laws of physics when you see a sky dance. The way they kind of they ignore gravity. They spiral upwards, and then they come down spiraling, and then they twist and turn, and they're trying to show off to a female and say, "Look, my nest is pretty good, and look at my action." Anyway, it was nice to go to Mull, and that's where the biscuits come from. So, but that's not why I like them so much. They are so good anyway. Sorry? Did we see? Yes, we did. 5. We saw 5 sea eagles. Yeah, in fact, more. We saw more sea eagles than we saw harriers. But the 2 encounters we had with the harriers were just the best. They're fantastic. Really close. But yes, yeah, we saw. And I've now seen more sea eagles down here in the last 6 months than I've seen on Mull. Now that the colony on the Isle of Wight is doing so well, although they've lost 2 birds to the bird flu, and which is very sad. And the one I saw, which I spoke about this time last year, that I saw a spiral of crows, a vortex of crows, maybe 100, 150, and at least a dozen kites and buzzards and you name it, they're all in this spiral. I thought, what the hell's going on? And the noise was unbelievable. And I got the bins on it. It was about a mile away, and at the top of the spiral was a seagull, and these birds were mobbing it. And it just was completely indifferent. It just opened its wings into the breeze, didn't beat its wings once, and just outsailed them and disappeared. And it went, maybe, it must have come to 6 me handily. I was on a hill 2 miles away, and it came this way, and in binoculars it still looked massive, 2 miles away, going downwind. And then it turned around, and it came upwind against the wind, and I kept my bins on it, kept the focus, and it kept coming, and it kept coming. I said, when are you going to sort of beat your wings? It never beat its wings, not once. And it just kept coming and coming and coming. And I thought, it's going to come towards me. And I was on a hill in some stubble. And sorry, I did tell this story. I think it was did I tell this story last year? It did just happen to me last year. I must have done. I'm telling it you again because it's a nice story. And then it came as if it knew I was on the hill, and it was just coming to check me out. And as it came over me, if you ever look through binoculars and you're looking straight up, and the bird's going over your head, it's quite difficult to balance. And it was a stubble field, and I tripped over and fell over. And as soon as I did that, the eagle went, ooh, roadkill, and started to circle. And it was coming down, and it was, when it was over here, it must have been overhand. It was at least 1,000, maybe 2,000 foot, incredibly high, but it still looked massive. But when it was right over me, it was only about maybe 700 feet, and it came down and circling all the time. And I thought, if I'm really still, it's going to come down. What am I going to do if it really does think that I'm dead and it's going to, have a go? And it was at about 100 foot, maybe still a little bit more. And there was this bang. I could hear the sound. It was sort of a soft poof, and a goshawk, a big female goshawk, came out of nowhere and slammed into it. And she didn't want it in the area. She of all the birds was the one to take on a seagull. And she had wings, maybe not quite, maybe 4 foot, 3.5 foot, and the seagull double that. It was 8.5 foot wings. I mean, if you imagine a bird, that's about 6'6". If you can imagine another foot on each side, that's what a seagull is. And broad, they're that deep, the wing. So it looked massive. And there's this fight going on above my head for just a few minutes, and then there's this big aerial kind of assault, and then they sort of rolled away from one another. There was a few feathers I saw, and the goshawk went back to her nest in the woods, and the eagle just it sort of batted it away. So there was no damage done, and it just floated off into the distance. And again, in all that time, it didn't beat its wings. How do they? No wonder they travel so far, because it's so effortless for them. You a friend? Oh, this is from Mike Wooten. Is Mike Wooten here? Yeah, Mike. This is your question. God, it's a long question. I was friends with Chris. You were friends with Rod Hutchinson, who was the boilie expert. Have you ever used a boilie when fishing? It's a kind of yes. Yeah. He once gave me a bag of his plum flavored soft boilies. It was at the NEC. I met him at the it was one of the angling conferences. Dreadful place to have to go, and he just came up and he said it was the year we were fishing at Redmire for Passion for Angling. We were going to start. We'd outbid everybody to get Redmire, and he said, when you go to Redmire, use one of these. And so I do have to confess now, and this was never revealed during the programme, that I caught a 24-pound common on one of Rod Hutchinson's peach-flavored boilies. Yeah, but everybody's going. Good night, good night. He's gone to phone the Angling Times. Shock confession. Yeah, because in the film, you actually see me baiting up. And it was actually, I was baiting up before I made the first cast, and I was baiting up with maggots. But it didn't work. So I thought, I could try one of Rod's. But you don't see me cast it out. Clever. Casting at the Sun, chapter 17. Let me just finish this a little bit. This will sound better from me. We know you disapprove of some modern fishing tackle. Thank you, Aaron, for this. And I think I read that you would never use the hair rig. And your question is that you've got a question mark there. So, no, I would never use the hair rig. And I never did, never would. So that's good. That's cleared that one up. Chapter 17 of Casting at the Sun, we read about an interesting character referred to as Jack the Roadman. You and Rod met him at the Royal Arms, which was at Langgrove, just a few miles west of Redmire. Can you tell us more about Jack? Why was he called the Roadman? Where did he live? Oh God, this is such a complex question. What did he do for work? Well, he was a roadman. He actually, he just repaired roads for the council. He was a council roadman, and he was such a great character. And he was the Langgrove shove halfpenny champion, and he was just such a. He would be very eager to tell me and Rod, what he'd seen on his travels. Because being a roadman, he was up in the hills mending. He would be at old lanes and things like that. He liked to keep the old places moving, still working, so that people wouldn't be falling down holes and breaking their ankles and things like that. And he knew where all the birds were living and where the foxes and badgers were. So he was a fascinating character. And one Saturday night, when I'd had a very good week at Redmire, at the end of the week, I took him on and everyone said, "Oh, you're going to try and outdo Jack the Roadman, halfpenny, shove halfpenny rather." He said, "It's pointless," and I beat him. It was because when you get into a good run, and Rod was in the same mood. We had to toss a coin to see who was going to play him. I won the toss, and I fluked it a little bit, but it was a genuine shove halfpenny board, proper slate board and everything. But it was lovely. Anyway, yes, he again was one of these people I miss a lot, because every time he went to Redmire, one of the first people I wanted to go and see, sometimes before I even went to Redmire, I'd carry on going, get to the pub, because I knew he'd be there if I arrived in the evening. He would be there leaning against the bar. And I'd just say, "What have you seen, Jack?" And he just had such a lovely manner. He was such a beautiful man. I really, really liked him. And then when I last saw him, which was the year after I dropped out, I went back there because we were staying at Hay-on-Wye. It was the Royal Arms, Langgrove. And I got there, I was staying at a little cottage with my then wife Claire and daughter, Camilla, who was probably 2 then. And I got and I just thought something different. It was only maybe 4 years after I'd left, and I hadn't seen him for 4 years. And the wind was blowing, what did it? It was like a sort of beginning of a film, The pub sign was swinging. It was going, and it was making that kind of slightly haunted. And I knew it felt different anyway. And I went in, and he wasn't by the bar, and people were just looking a bit sort of just very kind of no murmuring. And I went up to the landlord. I said, "Jack about?" And they said, "Jack's gone," and he died that week. He died that week, which was he was a unique character, which is why I had to put him in the book. And this is why what's the word I'm looking for? When you dedicate the book. Yeah, I dedicated Casting at the Sun to him and to Dick Walker. But yeah, so it was, and as soon as I got there, everyone got up and said, and that whole evening was like a wake, because he'd only been gone. He'd been gone on the Tuesday, and I was there on the Thursday, I think. So it was only a couple of days. And so the whole pub joined in celebrating Jack the Roadman. So it was, in the end, it was sad, but it was a lovely evening. Anyway, that's Jack the Roadman. I'm glad you raised him, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to celebrate him again. As for your other questions, I think we can. Jack, the other Jack. You go on about Jack Hilton, and this will be the last one, because then there might be a moment for something else to do. Otherwise, the questions will go on too long. You say, regarding Redmire, Jack Hilton controlled the syndicate. This is in the 60s and up to sort of 75. How did I avoid the jealousy issues that were associated with success and catching carp regularly? I've read that Jack Hilton gave up fishing and became a Jehovah's Witness. Did I know him well? Did I think he gave up fishing because Redmire had burnt him out and there was nowhere else for him to go? More or less, yeah. He was so intense. He was the most intense carp fisherman. I mean, Rod was intense, but he kept his sense of humour. Jack didn't keep his sense of humour. It became very, very serious for him. And he would get, I remember the year before I joined Redmire, I think it was with his friend Bill Quinlan, Bill said that Jack had fished there one week. He was determined that he was going to get a fish. He'd lost a big fish on a potato. They used to fish potatoes in that year. And he lost this monster fish, not necessarily the king, but it was probably a 50-pound common, and he hooked it on a potato. And the next time he went, he cast out 2 rods on the Sunday evening, and the potatoes were still there on the Sunday afternoon following when he reeled in. And that's how intense he was. He they're in the right position. I've got it in the right place. I know the carp go through there. It'll take it eventually. Of course, it didn't, because it doesn't happen like that all the time. And in fact, it hardly ever happens at all. They'll pick up the bait in the same place twice when they're not in that kind of mood. You've got to get the conditions right for everything to work. So yes, and he did become a Jehovah's Witness, which was very sad, because I think that was it's kind of an abandonment of your own spirit. So, and I knew him well, because every year there used to be a Redmire meeting at his place in Norfolk, and we'd all go up there and we'd chat and talk about the season and talk about things that we were going to have to do to it, maybe change. I'd always be saying, no, we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that, because I never liked anybody to do any working parties, but there were always some working parties. But yes, so I once he'd gone, once he'd left, I never saw him again. But he was a very interesting character, and it was him who gave me the nod when his friend Tom Mintram, who was a good friend of his, said, I've got this lad, he lives just down the road, he's taken me to a really good carp lake, we've had some good times together, I think he'd be a good member, should we get a vacancy? What do you think, Jack? Oh, if he's a friend of yours, yeah. And that's how I got in. So I owe it to Tom and Jack. I would never have caught that carp. Actually, that carp the big carp isn't important. It was the time I spent with Rod and the fishing. That was much more important. I never went there thinking I'd catch a record carp. It was never my ambition. It was such an incredible place to fish, that's all. And the fact that I had virtually 5 years fishing there was great. But and the big fish, that was almost incidental compared to the joy I had just fishing, just being able to sort of completely sink into the place and become part of it. Any other questions? Come on, there's got to be a daft one.
Yeah. Did you not?
Wait a minute. He had his hand up. I do promise to come back to you.
What's your favourite cheese?
Cheese? Stilton. How much did you win?
No. Did you know that Bob was out fishing for the pike in Midwinter Madness? Or did he genuinely creep out and poach?
Yeah, he genuinely, because he knew I wouldn't get up early. So yeah. Yeah, he was gone. yeah.
If you were to come back as a ghost,
I might be a ghost. They can be quite convincing.
if you are a ghost, where do you live? If you're not a ghost and you come back as one, where would you like to hang out?
If I came back as I used to think it would be somewhere like Redmire. No, I think the hill where I watch the sunrise once a year and have done for, as I say, nearly 40 years. It's my go-to place. Although I don't really believe in ghosts, but I have had ghost experiences. You know, they're trying to convince me that they're there, but I cannot really accept it. But certainly at Redmire, and there's a story, and where did it, was it? Someone to remember it, surely. Oh, it's in Casting of the Sun. Yeah, when I heard when I was just dozing, and I heard my name being shouted out. I mean, and I heard the echo, and I thought, that's Rod. He's caught a fish, and I thought he'd arrived late, because when I got to the lake, it was late October. There was no one there, and I thought I just dozed off, and he'd caught a fish, and he needed a hand with a net. And I heard this, Chris, from the willow pitch on the other side. I was fishing in the evening pitch, which was the haunted pitch. I went round, I picked up the landing net, I'm coming! And he wasn't there. There was no one there. And there was no one poaching, and no one, you know, and you could see, it was a good moon, I could see all around. There was no one, and no one ever came down. You'd have thought it would be poached occasionally, Redmire, in those days, but it never was. Or not to our knowledge, maybe in the close season. But yeah, so now and again, and I have had moments, you know, maybe in the middle of, there was a yew wood I used to go to in my kind of late teens, when you are a bit more impressionable, where some of the trees were, you know, like 2,000-3,000 years old. It's a wonderful place to try and, it was a kind of, it's like a trial by yew tree. Can you stay in this yew wood from sunset to sunrise? Because, you know, after dark, it was black. It was like being in a coal mine, because yew trees are dense, ancient ones, completely dense. Even when the moon was shining, you just see a few spots of light on the ground. And in summer, the moon is very low, so it would never cast much light. And I used to try and spend a whole night in this wood. And one night I did, and that was quite creepy. And there were all kinds of things going on around me. And I thought, this is the whole night was alive. And I didn't run screaming. I just, in the end, I was thinking, this is fantastic, because there was no explanation. You know, I mean, there were badgers about, but this was different. Anyway, so yes, I still don't believe in ghosts, but although there was that moment, which everybody who was there at Pentridge, was it 5 years ago, when I was
It was the first talk, yeah.
It was in the first talk we did, and I was telling a story about Rod, who died only that year, couple of months before the talk. He had died, and I'd finished by saying something like, you know, you're a great friend, and I think I was thanking him. I remember it was a privilege to fish with you, Rod, as if he was there, and the door opened to the village hall, and it was well firmly shut. You know, I mean, as a policeman shut it, for God's sake, you know, and it just opened, and it creaked open very slowly, and everybody turned around, and it was as I'd said, you know, thank you, Rod, and the door opened, and I just,
Goodbye, wasn't it?
yeah,
Goodbye.
yes, actually, it was thank you and goodbye, and then the door opened. I said, and was it you who said hello, Rod? But I think I said hello, Rod, too. Yeah, yes, I said, it's Rod. Hello. Yeah, I said, it's Rod. Hello, and come in, and the whole hall just went very, very quiet. So, but it was just the wind.
Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're about to start the auction. Before I start, I just want to say we've had a few technical issues tonight, so we're going to try and let people who are online bid as well. So there's going to be a slight delay in the bidding. We're not going to rush it, just so we can make sure that no one misses out, because obviously it's for charity. So, lot one. I mean, you don't really need to say much about it, do you, really? Look at it. It's just incredible. This has been kindly donated by David Cowdery. It's an original, truly one-of-a-kind portrait of Chris, stoking his Kelly kettle. And we have to start this already. We've had quite a few bids come in, and so I'm starting at £2,100. And that is still cheaper than you could buy it for. I'm looking for 2,100. I'm not looking any special direction. Is that a bid? How are we looking on the telephone? Oi, we have 2,200 this could be. Sold. Wow, congratulations, £2,200. Brilliant, great start. And well worth it as well, because that is...
The Bird of Prey experience is with us. We are near Chard. It lasts for about 3 to 3.5 hours. We have 40 birds of prey. We have eagles, falcons, hawks, owls. You get to hold a huge amount of the birds, and then you go into the field and you fly them. It retails, we usually sell them at £95. It does also include a free spectator. So if you want to bring somebody along to come and take photos and enjoy it with you, you're more than welcome. Okay, I think that's it. You're welcome.
That's brilliant. 25's done. £100. We've got £100. Sold. Thank you, Lee. What do you think we should start at? Is that your bid? 20 quid. 20 pound, right. 30. 40. 70. 100 at the front. Chris, it's for charity. All right, so yeah. Well, 150. Loving this. This is getting proper exciting, Chris, isn't it? Right. Cheers. Sold. 210. Well done. Thank you. Right, this is where the fun begins, I reckon. Kevin's hat. I'm starting the bids at £450.
The reason it's all mud stained is when I took Kevin down out of the shallows at Redmire, his hat fell off, and unfortunately I turned around I got to the shore, turned around to get it, and it disappeared, and I was treading on it. So that's proper Redmire mud, silt. Neil said, "Have they got anything sort of old tat, you know, but something with a bit of perhaps history?" I immediately thought of Kevin's hat. So yeah, it's probably worth about £3. But it is Kevin's hat, so you know, apparently that adds value. I never caught a carp on it, but it, if somebody else wanted to use it, I bet they would have caught a carp. That's not true. I did catch a carp on it. I did. I had a 12-pounder, and there's a picture of that fish in Deepening Pool. I think it's in Deepening Pool. There's a fish, and then that's before I used it on Kevin. There's a picture of me wearing that hat with this fantastic living common carp. Looks probably a bit bigger, but it was only 12 pounds, so I did catch. And you'll see the hat in Deepening Pool. It may have been in the Passion for Angling book, but it is. £6.50 for an old straw hat. Could have come off a scarecrow. I mean, that's what it was meant to be. This is just an announcement that we now have somebody willing to pay £950 for a partly rat-chewed, mud-stained straw hat. That must be a record, and so I admire you and wish you well for the rest. But you're probably not going to get it after all that.
1,000 in the room.
1,000.
Oh my God. Any advance of £1,100? Sold. 1,100. Thank you very much, everybody. Got that, okay. Right, first number on the raffle is...
Right, we're going to wrap up now, but I just want you like to know, last year we raised £4,700 for charity. Tonight we have raised £7,900. Yeah. So, thank you.